Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 14 of the His and Her Life Hacks podcast. I'm Larry. This is Dawne, and we're joined by a very special guest, Dennis Gillan, who I'll introduce more formally in a moment. Today's topic is focused on suicide awareness and prevention through connection and compassion. And those last four words I took directly from Dennis's website, Half a Sorrow Foundation, which he'll talk about more. It's a difficult topic, but one that we feel needs to be discussed and brought forward to make an impact. In our particular area that we live, this area has been devastated over the last 5 years with teenage suicide. And in particular, it was a 2.5-year period where 7 teenagers fell by suicide. And it's something that is just very sensitive in this area. And we want to do our part to help, and not just in this area, but more broadly, and not just this age group as well. And we want to help with insights and tools for those of you who might be experiencing that hopelessness, or those who may be aware of somebody is going through that. And I don't know a better person to bring on than Dennis Gillan to talk about this. So I'm going to introduce Dennis. I'll read his background here. So Dennis is an ordinary man bearing an extraordinary story. 11 years apart, Dennis suffered the loss of both his brothers to suicide, sending him into a spiral of depression and addiction. With supreme courage and self-motivation, Dennis embarked on a journey of therapy and sobriety. He started volunteering at a crisis hotline, and the more his old wounds began to heal, the more strongly he felt about transforming his personal story of grief into a life mission to help others. Today, Dennis is a sought-after speaker, educator, and author, creating an environment where people feel comfortable discussing uncomfortable subjects, such as mental health and suicide prevention. With his inspirational story, charisma, and sensitivity, Dennis captivates audiences all across the country, communicating messages of hope, resilience, and help seeking to save lives. Dennis is the founder of Half a Sorrow Foundation. He is also my friend and Phi Sigma Kappa fraternity brother at West Virginia University. So we're honored, Dennis, to have you join us. And it's very necessary and influential work that you do, and your story of turning kind of your tragedy into purpose lines up perfectly with what Dawne and I talk about, of turning your pain into purpose. So we're super honored again to have you join us here today.
Yeah, Dennis, you have an extraordinary story and message. So tell us how you got there or here.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Larry and Dawne. This is an important topic. And how did I get here? Kicking and screaming. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do this at all. And it's not the script I would have written for myself. And that's for a lot of us. Here I was bopping through this thing called life. And I was in a very selfish period. I was probably 20 years old in 1983 when the phone rang. And when I say selfish period, my life was about me. It was me, 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 all about me. And the phone rang. It was my younger sister on the phone, and I'm one of 5 kids. Sheila's the oldest, Mark, then me in the middle, then Janice, then Matthew. And then Janice was on the phone saying, Dennis, you need to come home. And as Larry said in the intro, we were at college together. I was in Morgantown, West Virginia, at West Virginia University, and 8 hours from home. I was 8 hours from New York.
Mm.
And she informed me that my older brother died by suicide. At first, they told me it was a car accident. They didn't know what to tell me. They wanted me to come home, and then later on, I found out during the day that it was a choice Mark made, an unfortunate choice. He battled depression for years, and the disease state won. The Gillan family lost. I mean, it's tough. And I went dark. I went home. Seriously, I went home like on a Thursday. I was back in school on a Tuesday. It was a brief in and out. I would have done some things different there. Then I think I'm doing okay. I actually got out of school I thought was okay after that trauma. I got a job with a pretty good company. I was living in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And then the phone rang again, and it was my younger sister Janice again, informing me that my younger brother Matthew followed Mark, and we lost Matt to suicide. So that's 2 brothers, 11 years apart, and that rocked my world. Mark rocked my world, but then it's different when it's your little brother. That really set me into a tailspin. But on that one, I had some sense about me at that point not to do any substances or alcohol because, I was pretty depressed. Alcohol is a depressant, and I had a 4-hour car ride from Carlisle to New York and then back. I remember thinking on the way back, said, Dennis, you can't drink anymore. You got to stop. You got to stop. You're vulnerable. I felt vulnerable for the first time in my life. Up until that point, I was bulletproof. I'm, 31 years old, married, living in Carlisle. I got a nice house, all this good stuff. Me. And then, all of a sudden, it's like, man, I'm vulnerable. I'm the last Gillan boy. And it was me and my two sisters left. I'm like, damn, what am I going to do with this? So the sobriety piece came in, and that was a good move for me. And I'm happy to report it's still going on. It's been 30 years. This year it'll be 30 years. And it's a bittersweet anniversary. I want to say, oh, congratulations. Oh, wait, high five. It's 30 years without Matthew. It's bittersweet. I got drunk the night before Matthew. We buried Matthew. I got hammered, to tell you the
Yeah.
truth. Went to the funeral hungover. And then, so it's 30 years without Matt. So I don't celebrate it, but I do celebrate recovery. I do celebrate people's recovery. If that helps anyone out there, I'm telling you, it was a good move for me.
That's good. And now I know, we all think that we're well versed or we can recognize depression in people, but I know from my own personal bout with it, I hid my depression very well with a smile on my face. And I presented to the world like I was great, but inside I was crumbling and really felt like I was dying inside. But and I know many people do that. When we think about the comedians that have committed suicide, what do they do all day? They make people laugh and they laugh themselves, but deep inside they're crumbling. So was there a history like that you knew of generationally within your family dynamic of depression? And then looking back, like, did you notice signs that maybe you just didn't think were a sign? Just for our listeners, maybe they could pay attention.
Sure, Mark battled depression like every young man around that age. He was trying to find his spot in the world, and that's what we're all doing. We're trying to find our tribe, in a sense. And I often look at, you look at that old picture of the Microsoft founders. You ever see that picture of the Microsoft founders, Bill Gates, when he's a kid and all these? Mark would have fit in perfect with that crowd because he was like this electronics geek before it was cool. Um, he would have been perfect for like when you go to, what is it, Geek Squad at Best Buy. That's what his niche
Yeah.
was. He was really good.
Yeah.
And that was a time where, we were all into sports and school and all that stuff. And he liked to fiddle in the garage. So he was trying to find his people, and he did. There were outward signs, I guess. One time he ran away and just said he didn't feel like being here, and he just took off. And then he came back, and he was old enough to know better. And, there were some signs. And then when Mark made that choice, and it was well thought out, to tell you the truth. There was a note, there was a plan. Um, the minute we lost Mark, we had a family history of suicide. We just had it. It's
Yeah.
there. I don't recall anyone else, generationally with that. Generationally, we have alcoholics or Irish. That you can't shake a tree without an Irish drunk falling out of it. The
Right.
Gillan, it just comes with the turf. Um, Feels like, but that was it. Substance use that way. We had that, but Mark was the first one I really knew of, like in my you know clan, that had like that battle depression. I'm sure the others have, and did handled it differently. But when Mark died, we had a family history, and that should have put us all on high alert, because then we lose Matt, and Matt was a little bit different. Matthew, my younger brother, was drunk and had a firearm, and 54% of all suicides with a firearm. And I'm sitting there going, man, if you just would have got drunker, he could have passed out, and then we'd still have him. So
Mhm.
one was planned. You look at the Tale of Two Cities. One was like thought out, sober. I'm doing this. And the other one was like, I'm drunk. I'm mad at the world, and I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And they're both forever decisions. You can't come back from that. And that's what we
Yeah.
call it in the suicide prevention business. That's a forever decision, and we should not be making forever decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So Dennis, I kind of kicked this off a little bit by talking about this area and the devastating impact with teenage suicide. You travel around the country, you talk to schools, high schools, colleges, you're on college campuses, you're having lots of conversations with the youth in that age group. What actions do you encourage them directly as you're talking to them, or even those responsible parents, teachers, administrators, coaches who are around them, for different aspects of their life? Um, what do you encourage? What actions to have meaningful conversations to understand the signs and kind of raise awareness within their group, their peer group, or those who are responsible for raising them, or caretakers.
That's a great point, Larry. And I'm sorry for what you're all going through. That may be even with these 7 losses that you described in your intro. That may be a form of contagion, and you got to be careful with that.
Yeah, they
We
talked
feared
about
that.
that.
Yeah, we had a big fear about that when we lost Robin Williams. Like, oh no, and everybody was all hands on deck. You want to because you don't want contagion. Like one person saw it. Sometimes like someone who's vulnerable will see the treatment that person got. Like they dedicated their locker and all that stuff. There was a ceremony. Like, maybe I want that. Um, so you got to be careful with that. You got to come in and swoop in and try to nip that in the bud with the professionals. And I'm not. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I want to get that out front early. When I was at West Virginia University, Larry, I studied business. I studied accounting. Um,
Yeah.
but when I speak to the kids, when I say kids, 15 to 24 is a demographic. This is how they line them up. 15 to 24 is a pretty good demographic. You get high school and you get college, and your brain starts fully forming about mid-20s. So right at 15 to 24, it's the second leading cause of death. And that gets a lot of attention. Accidents are number one. I always want to know what's number one. Accidents. Shoot, the kids start driving at 15, 16. So
Yeah.
that's number one. Suicide and homicide go back and forth for this 2 spot, which is awful. But any premature death. That demographic, they got rocked by COVID, but I'm happy to report that in the latest uh, information we got from the CDC in 2022, that demographic went down in
Okay.
death by suicides, which tells me these kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. Think about this group that went through COVID in school. That was awful. That was absolutely senior year. I remember as a senior, I was so about that last lacrosse season. This was going to be it. It's I've waited on the bench forever. It's my time to shine. And you told me in March that thing was canceled. It would have crushed me.
Yeah.
So at first I didn't get what the kids were going through, and then I got it big time. Like, wow, that's not cool at all. So what are we, 4 years? Coming on 4 years. Can you believe it? 4 years coming off that. So anyone now is a senior, in college, they had that when they were a senior in high school. They went through that. So that had an impact, but they're more resilient than they know. I give them a lot of credit when I speak, and Larry, when I do speak, I go over risk factors and warning signs, part of my talk. And one time at a college in Clarion University up in Pennsylvania, I was packing up my stuff at the end of the talk, and it was a bunch of fraternity guys. They called the Interfraternity Council, IFC, and I was coming out of the lobby, and all these guys were around this one dude, and I called over there. I saw them all there. I said, "You guys all right over there? Is like everything okay?" Because I never usually they scatter. If it's a mandatory training that I give up, boom, they're gone. Got to go, and they're out. Hopefully going to the library to study. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I go over there. Hey, you guys all right? And this one guy peels away from the crowd. He comes over to me. He goes, "Yeah. When you were going over the warning signs, the guy in the middle turned to a fraternity brother next to him and said, 'That dude is talking about me.'"
Oh,
So as I
wow.
was going over the warning signs, he identified himself. And what was really cool and what was really brave was he told somebody about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And then,
absolutely.
and you all can relate to this, we're horrible at asking for help. The minute he asked for help, you're going to see these guys whoosh. There was like 15 guys around this one dude. They were not letting him go anywhere. And that was
Wow.
very encouraging, but you have to be willing to raise your hand. And,
Yeah.
yeah, when I go over the risk factors warning signs, you can look around and see you notice anyone, but sometimes that person's the one you see in the mirror. It's you.
Yep.
So I hats off to that kid for saying he's talking about me, and
Absolutely.
he identified. I wish my
Yeah.
brother would have raised his hand.
Right. Right. How about to the people who are responsible for them? Right? Is there things that you encourage them to look for? Some of those warning signs that, again, my kids are in this age group. I have roughly probably in that 24, like 6 of them, right, are still in that age group. And what do you encourage those who are responsible? Like, what are the signs that they should be looking for?
It's very interesting. As a parent and as a close friend, you'll know when something's off. They say based on nerve endings alone, we have 3 brains. One obviously in our head, one in our heart, and one in our gut. And I always say in suicide prevention, sometimes you got to trust your gut. You just got to go into an awkward space and go, are you okay? And even ask the question, are you suicidal? So Larry, what predominantly we see, and I remember doing it myself, is people will withdraw. They don't feel like peopling. They withdraw and they isolate.
Yeah.
And remember this, a stick alone can be broken by a child, but a stick in a bundle cannot be broken. Try to stick with your bundle, whatever it is, school, sports, the debate club, the Lego club. I don't care what you're involved in, but you'll notice. And then, Larry, we saw at the fraternity, and I now my bundle's my tennis team, my church group. But when people start pulling away, people stop showing up for stuff. And for your kids, they retreat to their room. They never come out. Like, what's going on? And you have to go with your gut. Step in before they step out. I always tell people, I'd rather you embarrass yourself and say, are you okay? Are you suicidal? I'd rather you embarrass yourself than be asked to be a pallbearer at a funeral.
Yeah.
Because you didn't, and you're like, oh my gosh, I should have said something. Yeah, say something. And a lot of the stuff we do, in addition to my keynote talk, there's a lot of training that goes on. Suicide prevention training, like ASSIST is applied suicide intervention skills training, Safe Talk, QPR. There's one for church leaders called Soul Shop. All those boil down to that really essential component is like, can you say the word suicide in a question? Are you suicidal?
Mm.
And we have to learn how to say that. You got to get over that hump. It's very tough at first, but after a while you get used to it. Just say it. Say it.
Yeah.
And it's,
Okay.
we talk about the kids a lot. One of the groups that gives me fits is 44 to 54, my people, and 54 and higher. Those numbers are high for middle-aged men. And then women, Dawne, I'm not going to let you all off the hook. I told you earlier, 3 to 4 times more attempts for women. So we have a lot of work to do. But one of the things we can do is ask someone if they're suicidal. Ask them straight up.
I feel like that's a question that could be answered with a lie easily. Like if somebody had asked me, well, I wasn't suicidal, but I'm trying to think of an example. But if I asked somebody that I think is depressed, are you suicidal? I feel like that person would be like, no, of course not. I'm fine. And then to take that answer, I almost feel like they're probably lying or. So how do you judge that? And then I was going to ask if you actually would list the warning signs of what you said that you listed, I guess, in that auditorium. I don't know if they were warning signs of depression or warning signs of depression that's turning towards suicide, but whatever those warning signs are might be helpful.
Sure. Let's take the first question, though. If you ask someone, are you suicidal? Said no. We lie all the time. When someone goes, how you doing, Dennis? Fine. I could be having the worst day on the planet. I'm like, fine. I'm fine.
Right.
I'm just fine. We just do it. And sometimes we ask that question, how you doing? We don't want the answer. If somebody says, like Dawne, in your example, you said, listen, I'm concerned about you. Are you suicidal? And they say, heck no, no. And you think they're lying. You said, listen, all right, I'm going to take that for face value. You said, no. If you ever get to that point, you have to know that I'm here for you. Do you feel the tone, the temperatures drop? You went from this accusatory, and it just goes, hey, I'm here for you. If you ever get there, you let me know because I'm here for you. And then, now we're having a conversation, not an argument. Nobody buys in an argument. No, if you start doing this, I think you're suicidal. No, I'm not. I think nobody wins there when you start butting heads.
Right.
So that's a great follow up there. Just say, if you ever get to that point, I need you to count on me. Put me on your safety plan. You have my phone number in your phone. I will drop everything to be with you.
Yeah.
And people just want to feel like they belong, a sense of belonging. Now, the risk factors and warning signs, there are a lot of them, but the warning signs, we break them down into 3 groups: talk, behavior, and mood. Talk is text counts as talk, by the way, with the kids, and for the adults too. I'm not picking on them. But we will have stuff like, oh, you'd be better off without me. They may joke about it or say something like that. You'll miss me when I'm gone. And if someone jokes about it in my presence, I don't get all woke on them. I don't go, hey, you don't know my story. I lost 2 brothers to suicide. You can't talk like that. Again, back to that. Nobody buys in an argument, but I will pull them aside privately. And I'll say, hey, listen, we were back there all talking. These guys, oh, you're better off dead. I lost 2 brothers to suicide. And just That's where I'm coming from. Are you okay? Again, the temperature drops. It's a private conversation. And if you are, you're not, if you want to go outside and talk, or if you don't want to talk now, here's my phone number. Whenever you need me, I'm there. So risk factors, talk, behavior, mood. Behavior, people start acting, the withdrawing part, they start giving stuff away. Hey, you want my guitar? Like, dude, I thought you loved playing guitar. I don't like it anymore. So you start seeing that stuff, and visiting or calling people to say goodbye. My brother Mark, on the day he died, went to a friend's house, and unfortunately, he didn't get out of the car. I learned this years later. He pulled in the driveway. She opened up the door, and then he backed out. That was the day. If he gets out of the car and says, "I'm not doing so hot," everything changes. You have a different guest today. That's a fact. So, and then, the last one, talk, behavior, mood. And what we should do, we should write this up, and we could actually drop it on your website, whatever. We'll get these to you.
Yeah.
But mood is just, that's where your gut really comes in. They're just acting different, maybe outbursts. There's one on the mood list that really threw me off, was somebody is suddenly happier or calmer. Like they were manic on Monday and they're fine on Tuesday. Do they have a plan? Do they see the end? And they pulled the guy off the Golden Gate Bridge. They pulled him off, and they said to him, like in a post-vention survey, they said, "What did you see when you saw the water?" Now, most of us see a violent death. You're doing 75 miles an hour. It's awful. And you hit the water like cement. It's not a good way to go. But for some of those folks, and what he said was very interesting. He goes, "When I looked down, I saw peace." That's how much pain he was in. Now, a part of him needs to die. The pain part needs to die, not the whole person.
Right.
So I get it. I can't take that guy's answer. He goes, "Oh, you shouldn't think like that." That's his answer. And, that's what he saw. So hope that helps you answer your question, Dawn.
Yeah, no,
Talk, behavior, mood.
that's very helpful. And I
Go
think
with
we
your
should
gut.
listen to what you said, for sure. I like what you just said too about the pain part needs to die, but not the human person. Because, if I could, as a coach, if I could break that into a conversation, break that down and say, you know what, there's an opportunity for us to fix your soul, but your human body can still stay here. It needs to, there's more work to be done. So it's a matter of fixing the inside and stating that the outside is perfectly fine. So it's no different than taking your car into the shop to get repaired. The physical car is still great, but the inside just needs some work. And we all need work. So,
Absolutely. I'm not going to total the car. I'm just going to get an oil change. I'm going to change some things. I'm not going
yeah.
to scrap it. And I get it. I may change the whole engine if I have to, but let's keep the car. Let's keep the person. Good point, Don.
Yeah. Our last guest, actually, she was on and she was talking about health and fitness, but she was talking about her journey through obesity. And that basically led to her coping was to eat. And she said she had a therapist appointment, and that therapist said, when you're going through the pain, and if you got a flat tire, you wouldn't go flatten all other three tires to make that equal. You would try to work on the one tire. So I
Wow.
thought that was a great analogy too. Yeah.
That is great.
Instead of throwing in the towel and just completely, saying it's all over, versus maybe we just need to fix one thing, one piece here. So
And that's an interesting point. You had a guest on that dealt with obesity. And I always say in my talks, our physical health is just as important as our mental health. And there's a yin yang thing that we need them both. There's spirituality too. You add them all three in, but your physical, mental, spiritual. And recently I was speaking and somebody videotaped it and took a picture. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm on weight. I could see it. It's always photos. It's like you never feel it. Yeah, yes, I know my jeans were tight, and if the button flew off, I would have killed a member of the audience. It was like that tight, but it's like I could still get in them. So I can't. But I started on this little um, physical journey recently. The New Year resolutions. It'll last till Valentine's Day, then I'll quit. No,
yeah.
but it makes a big difference. That whole thing. So hats off to your friend who identified the physical manifestations of a mental health issue. It was her eating. Dude, I'm the opposite. If I'm something stressing out, I don't eat, and all of a sudden I lose all this weight for no reason. and it's
Yeah,
not good.
that's me. That's why I can't relate to the obesity side, but she was picked on as a child for being obese, and I was equally picked on for being a skinny, scrawny girl, and both impacted us the same way. Our self-esteem, our confidence. We went through life being picked on and bullied, and so it impacted us. And we were the opposite, but I'm the same way. When I get upset or whatever, I just stop eating because my stomach hurts
Yeah, and it's
because I'm
interesting
upset over whatever it is. So,
in females, and I can't speak for females because I'm a male, but when I bring young ladies up on stage, and I do that at colleges, we'll find a couple of kids that tell us about their mental health journey. Often in females, it's an eating journey. There's a manifestation of an eating disorder, plus or minus, either way, what you just talked about. But it's interesting that dynamic.
yep, for sure. Mm.
So you use one of the things that you are kind of known for, and I saw it in your TEDx talk. Which, by the way, we'll talk about your foundation here at the website at the end, but and where you can find some of the information. But you use humor a lot in your talks and when you're up in front of people and even during that TEDx talk. So you bring levity to a very challenging situation. Is there advice, like, you talked about be very direct, like, are you suicidal, which is about as direct as you can possibly be. Is there a way through maybe humor that somebody should kind of use or approach to somebody kind of and make it non-threatening, so that they are willing to kind of know that you care and listen? Is there a different approach that way that you found to be helpful? Or maybe you'd give advice to others about that.
Sure, Larry. The introduction of humor for me in my talk took a while to get there because it's a very serious topic, and it's almost for a personal, my personal safety. If I don't laugh, I'll cry. It's one or the other. There's like
Yeah.
rare middle ground. So one time I was at the Air Force here, Shaw Air Force Base in Sumter, South Carolina, and I had to do 6 talks in one day. One of them,
Wow, that's a
yeah,
lot.
one of them drains me. I have to relive the 2 darkest days of my life. So this is early on in my career, and I'm going stats, stats, stats. It's like death by PowerPoint, and I'm starting to feel for the audience because I'm bored. I'm the speaker. I'm starting to get bored, and somewhere in the middle of like the 4th or 5th one, I went on a rant. I just went off script and went on this rant. And it was, when I use humor, I don't talk about, I'm not flippant towards the disease state or anybody suffering. It's mostly aimed at Dennis, you know, how I stumble and bumble through life. So I go on this rant, tell this funny story, and I look up at the audience and they're laughing. And when they're laughing, something really interesting happens. When you laugh at a tough topic like this, all of a sudden, all these arms that were folded, unfolded.
Mm.
And now the message can get there, that life is worth living. So I find personally that humor in this talk helps disarm the audience because
Yeah.
nobody wants to come to a suicide prevention talk. Let's be honest. A lot of my talks on college campuses are mandatory. You have to come. And they come in there like PO'd at the world that they have to be there. I was at University of Kentucky, and I will bleep myself, but it was hilarious. I was holding the door, and before I speak, I go out to get in my head a little bit. I pray. And again, I go, God, is this what you want me to do? And he goes, yeah, this is what I want you to do. Get back out there. So I just disappear for a while. And as I was walking out, I was holding the door, and all these fraternity guys were coming in. And this one guy did not see the microphone on my lapel. He said to his, I can hear him, he's right there. He goes, I cannot wait till this blank is over with. My talk. He's talking about my talk.
Ah,
I'm like, oh, that's the guy I want. Younger Dennis Gillan
yeah,
would have totally got mad at that guy. Like, kill him, but older Dennis Gillan's like, that's the guy I need. The guy who doesn't think he needs it. And I didn't think I needed
yep.
it. And all of a sudden I needed it. That's the guy. So I totally used it in my introduction. I totally used that line. So I get it. I get it. So it worked to our favor. But that's where the humor comes in. If you saw the TEDx talk, there's humor in there. And then at one point, my TEDx talk, I was doing really, in my mind, you're our own toughest critic. I was doing horribly. And somewhere I was really nervous. I didn't think I was ready. It was 17 minutes, all memorized. And somewhere the audience laughed about my divorce. And I picked up on it. And I said, all right, that's great. You're laughing at the demise of my marriage. Again, self-deprecating humor. And that was it. That's all I needed. Now they're with me. And we all laughed together. And that's the turning point. Somewhere at that 8-minute mark, I'm like, all right, now I got them. Let's go. But up until then, I was
Yeah.
stumbling and bumbling right up until then.
I get in my head very easily. We just did a speaking stint and I feel like I failed brutally just because I was too scripted and too in my head. But if you put me up there and said, just flow, it would have been entirely different. But we'll see that. We'll see, because we're going away this weekend. So for that.
Well, if it's any solace to you, Dawne, my first talk that I really was brought in as the speaker, I cried the entire hour. They go, ladies and gentlemen, our
Been there, done that.
yeah, our next speaker lost 2 brothers to suicide. I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, that poor guy. And they go, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Gillan. I'm like, crap, it's me. And I cried the entire hour.
Yeah.
So if you cry for
I had that happen as well, and I was told that people connect with that because you are being human. So, it is what it is. So now, so tell us about, speaking of this, it's a good segue to the next item. So tell us about your purple file, because I think that's really a great story.
It is, and I didn't mean to start this thing called the purple file. I just had it. It happened to be a file that was purple. And whenever I got feedback from one of my talks, I would just shove it in this file, shove it in this file. Then one day I was in the conference room here at work, and somebody left a copy of this magazine called Entrepreneur. And I don't think I'm an entrepreneur, but I run a foundation. So I started thumbing through it, and there was a story in there called What Inspires Me. And it's the reader provides it. You write the article. And I read a really cool article about this guy. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool story. And I'm walking back to my office. Like, what inspires me? A little self-reflection. And I walk in and it's right on my desk. And I said, there it is. I'm going to pick it up. It's kind of fat right now, but I have a purple file.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to have to start another one, but it's any feedback I get from the talk, anything. There's one in there, young lady said, this is how all my feedback starts. She said, dear Mr. Gillan, I didn't want to come to your talk. Like nobody does. I get it. So I wrote her back and said, I didn't want to give it. So we're even. So we're good. And then she said something like, I didn't want to come to your talk, but I heard you say one thing. And that's what we always think. If one audience member gets one thing, victory. And so that's in there. So there are days, Dawne, I feel like quitting. And suicide prevention work, anytime you make your misery your mission, you make your pain your purpose, there are going to be days like, oh my gosh, am I making a difference? Does this count?
Right.
And there are days you're gonna want to just punt. You're like, I'm done. Trust me, they happen. And the purple files bailed me out every time. I just go in there and look at a note. There's a card in there from my mom. I'm going to cry thinking about that. I'm proud of the man you became. Stuff like that. Here, you got me with my mom. You got me. I'm going. There he goes.
Well,
you're doing God's work.
Yeah, you are.
Yes, and God's work, as we know, was not easy.
Not at all.
It was heavy. It was heavy, but it was meant to happen, and that's what we're all doing.
Yeah, and you're you're clearly called to do this, and nobody wants to live through what your story is, but you have, and to your point, you've turned it into your mission, your purpose in life now, and you're taking the best of what you have to help others. And that purple file, the size of that purple file, I don't think anything else can put a more of an exclamation point on the value and the impact that you're having with people. Other than that purple file, it's amazing. So I think this is kind of a great way to kind of close here. But I do want to kind of give you an opportunity to two things. Is there anything else you feel like is important to share to the audience about this topic, suicide awareness and prevention? And then secondly, the best way to kind of get in contact. And when we post this, of course, we're going to put your foundation and all that, the website and so forth, your contact info. But just in general, if there's a way to, you would prefer to have them contact you, if you could let us know.
Sure. And the first part of that question is anything we want to raise about suicide prevention. I think we touched on it during this course of the interview. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and say that person's me. We always think about other folks. We're always thinking about how we could help someone else. head on a swivel, look around, but every now and then look at the person that you see every morning when you're brushing your teeth and say, how's that person doing? And if you're not doing okay, that's all right. That's all right. It's normal. It's a symptom of being human. But don't be afraid to raise your hand and confide in somebody. Say, listen, this is not good. These thoughts I'm having. And we all have them. Don't, the person you confide in, it's like, oh my gosh, you're out of your mind. No, you're human. And let's go get help. So that, I think, Larry, I think that's the most important thing we could do is keep our eyes out for others, but sometimes that person's you, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
What was the second part of that question?
And then how about getting in contact?
Sure,
Best way to get in
I
contact.
prefer carrier pigeon. That's always the best. Now we have a website, and here's where the halfasorrow.org, and you can reach out to me there if you want to speak any groups, you name it, I'll go. halfasorrow.org, and here's where we got our name. I think this bears mentioning because it's a tough one. Half a sorrow. I got it from a Swedish proverb that goes like this: a shared joy is a double joy. A shared sorrow is half a sorrow. And when I started speaking about my brothers, which I didn't speak about for 16 years, I was quiet. I kind of disappeared. But when I started speaking about my brothers, I found the sorrow got smaller and smaller, half and half. Now, it's never going away. If you're a math major out there, you always have a remainder, and that's okay. That's okay because I miss my brothers. That's not going away. If it goes away, I'm dead. I gotta turn around. The Grim Reaper's going, Dennis, it's time.
Yeah.
If I don't feel it, but it also motivates me. You feel it to the point. I will have a pity party every now and then. Then I'll open up the purple file and then I'll come out swinging. Um, Larry and I lost a fraternity brother over the summer, and it knocked me on my rear end. An older, middle-aged male that we were trying to help, and we lost him. We lost him, and it still hurts, and it always will hurt. And I went into a funk, and then I come out of the funk like ready to go. So if it doesn't kill me, it makes me stronger.
I always say that you have to be real to feel in order to heal. You can't get to that healing side if you're not going to be honest with yourself or with others. So I think that's what you said was good. Just ask or tell somebody or talk about it.
And the feeling part, let's be honest, it's going to suck. It's going to suck. The feeling part's going to suck. Let's be honest. You have to walk through the valleys. It's going to stink. Nowhere to put it. Some kid asked me a question one time, and I didn't hear him very well, but he said, does it ever get any better? And I couldn't hear him, and I looked at him, I said, no, like it's always going to be there. Does it get better? Sure, as time goes on, but it's always going to be there. And he goes, all right, good. I'm glad you said that, because if you said it gets better, I would have walked out. I said, no, it doesn't. We're just going to have to carry this thing. And then we're going to have to, it gets lighter, but it's always going to be on my back, the loss of my brothers.
Yeah.
I think one of the main takeaways too from this is, and we've seen this in some of the other ones we've done, it's just you have to be, to your point, raise your hand. And I think in the world, and I think that's changing, right? The stigma has always been, if you raise your hand to try to seek help, that's a sign of weakness or whatever, but it's not. It's a sign of courage. It's a sign of awareness. It's a sign of desire to improve yourself, help yourself, your family, those around you. And you just need to raise your hand and come forward. And there's plenty of people there to help, but taking that first step is difficult. But I think that's the right advice. We are looking at everybody else, but to your point, I mean, sometimes it's us. And you just need to raise your hand and be comfortable and courageous that that's the right thing to go do. So, well, listen, we appreciate you certainly coming on and sharing, your mission or your misery that has turned into your mission, your wisdom that you obviously have learned over all these years, and certainly the impact you're making in this world. And, Dennis, we admire you for what you do every day. It's not easy, as you've said and articulated, but you do so with such grace, such humor. And I think you obviously are making a big impact through it. So just want to thank you again and appreciate it. And to all the audience, thank you for joining us, and look forward to hosting you on the next one.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you both.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening in to this episode of the His and Her Life Hacks podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to having you join us on future episodes. If there's a topic that you would like Dawne and I to discuss, please feel free to contact us at dawn.jacoby@grit2grace.com or larry.ambrose@grit2grace.com. See you on the next one.